Welcome to yet another podcast. And this time I'm delighted to be with Tanvi. Tanvi, I've known you for 16 years now when you
I
were in
know,
10th or 11th grade.
old, but time flies.
Yeah. Life flies. Yeah, life also kind of takes us off in different directions. And our paths crossed again when you were at Columbia and I came
Yes.
visiting. So that was a very long trip for me, I remember, and stopped by in New York to meet other students. So on and off, we've interacted in a while. But today's session is more to do with really helping students and young people make choices. Why don't you give a quick introduction about things that you do and why you do it? And we'll take it from there.
Sure, sure. Happy to do that and happy to be here, Arjun. I think I was telling somebody recently that Columbia and my undergraduate degree was very life changing for me in terms of me clarifying my values and also thinking about what I want to do ahead, which we'll talk about. And I think so. I'm grateful to anybody that guided me and helped me get there. So I'm very grateful to the work that we did together when I was in class 10 and 11 to help me get to Columbia. But just introducing myself. So my name is Tanvi. I'm based out of Delhi. I now have, I think, about 8 years of professional experience. I have a bachelor's degree and an MBA, and 8 years of professional experience largely in the social impact space. And I currently run a sustainable fashion social enterprise called Tamrin Chutney, which is a brand, a sustainable fashion brand. And we are a social enterprise in that we are have a dual mission, not just, of course, to run a business, but to also reduce textile waste and support the artisans that we work with.
That's interesting. Actually, it takes me on to different tangents, and I will go to different tangents in our conversation. How
Sure.
is the mindset of social impact? How is the mindset of people or young people in social impact changed in the last 15 years since you were, say, just thinking about life, go to college and experiences in New York and other parts of the world, and then coming back and choosing to do this? What
Sure.
you
Yeah.
think has been a shift in the way young people look at it?
Sure. I think the sector has definitely, I'm using a word that is loaded, professionalized over the last couple of decades. And again, not to say that 30 years ago people that were working in the sector wasn't they weren't professional, they were, but I think society did not consider this as a career. And it was like, oh, you're doing charity, or you are a jhola wala. And people, I think, society did not think that, okay, you could start in, as an entry level person in this career, then make your way up and lead organizations in this space. So I think that has definitely changed. I also see it I think in my own journey. I did not want to work in social impact when I was a teenager, but I did want to work in the government. And I think my parents really were one of the first few people that said, if you want to help other people, there is an entire sector that is not the government that you could also consider. So I think people are more and more people are getting aware that there are many more jobs in non-profits, and it's not just government or charity. I think there are different models, whether it's a for-profit social enterprise or just large non-profits that are, funded both by large domestic donors and international donors. And of course, you could also join the social sector on the funder side and be responsible for cutting checks and supporting non-profits. So I think there's just a lot more access to information about the different jobs and options available in the social impact space.
I remember when 15 years ago, we had students thinking about community service
Yeah,
projects or looking
yeah,
good on a college application.
yeah,
But the conversations, to be really fair, have evolved over a period of time, and students are
yeah,
starting younger, in a way, starting early, in early high school years or even late middle school years to talk about impact. And I believe the education system, many of the international boards
yeah,
have also started promoting
yeah.
knowledge and taking action on areas of SDGs students might be interested in. So in our work as well, what we've started doing is introducing the 17 SDGs, workshops around those. So, love to have someone like you and others, support our students to have these conversations or hear from you. And you're like, so for instance, a student would think of a few SDGs and see overlaps between the different SDGs and the target goals and feel super motivated to do something about it. But how do you rationalize and make a decision that this is feasible, this is within my circle of control or influence, instead of just, running after things which might not be suitable for the area you live in or resources that might be available? How did you choose the ideas that you work with now at Tamarind Chutney?
Sure. I think the interest really built up over time. And, you're speaking about your students, perhaps, who are, I'm sure, way more aware than I was at the same age. I think kids these days are, again, have just so much, they have so many more priors than I did. I was a little raw. I was like, okay, I want to help people. And that's about it. And then there were folks that you helped me speak to, and my parents and other mentors sort of made me speak to various people and also immersed me in experiences. And I think those experiences then later on that shaped my interest. So I think when I look at Tamarind Chutney, I think obviously there's environment, there's sustainable livelihoods, and then there's just overall ethical business. These are the three pillars. And I had different experiences throughout my life and my like college years and early 20s that kind of pulled me in that direction. So when I was applying to college, one of the community service pieces that I did was interning at this environment NGO called Chintan, which does fantastic work, continues to do fantastic work. And one of the projects was to go and do a photography project at a landfill. And I think just visiting that landfill was such a visceral experience. I don't have words to describe the pungency of the smell and the scale of the mountains of trash that we were climbing. And this is the landfill that is in Ghazipur in East Delhi. So it's very accessible to anybody living in Delhi, or a lot of our city's waste goes there. And so that, I think, just sat with me, and then I think just ingrained in my memory and my consciousness for years. And I didn't do anything with it immediately other than realize, oh wow, this is where our waste goes, and maybe I should think twice before wasting something. And as Indians, you are raised with this I think guidance against wasting. My mother would always be like, don't waste food and don't waste this, and maybe it comes from a mentality of wanting to save. But now I had another dimension that, okay, when I waste, this is where it goes, and it never goes away. And so that was just there. And I think over the years, I realized I had smaller experiences around wasting. I think I used to do a lot of shopping, online shopping, as retail therapy. I read an Economist article that talked about fast fashion and how environmentally polluting it was. I think that was definitely an epiphany for me at some point. I was like, okay, I need to stop shopping. There are other ways to mitigate stress if I'm stressed about an exam, or if I just want a distraction, I don't have to click add to cart and buy. And so the Chintan work, the Economist article, and various other sort of explorations that I had got me onto a journey of personal sustainable consumption. And then, that kind of grew and became something wider. I started in my MBA at Stanford. I also took a couple of classes in the School of Earth Sciences and Environment just to, again, learn. The sustainable livelihoods piece, I think, just came through some classes that I took in college that were about Indian history. And I got very interested in India's textile heritage and livelihoods that intersect with heritage and culture. And so that was another kind of thread. I interned at Fab India in college for that reason, because I was so fascinated by organizations that were working with communities on heritage livelihoods. And I think the ethical business piece just sort of came out of a recognition of my own privilege, the opportunities that I had been given to go abroad for college at such a young age. And I was looking at I was studying economics, so I think there were lots of people that were doing business anyway, but I also had the social mindset. So it's like, can we combine both of these? So I think there were just three different threads that came together. And while I've pinpointed a few core memories like the Ghazipur landfill and the Economist article or the Fab India internship, I think they're just small. Like you do, I think the process is such that you have an experience, then it sits in your head, and then you have another experience that possibly builds on that, and you kind of form your opinion over a few years. I think that's what happened to me.
That's really wonderful. Yeah, we've seen that happen, not just with you, with a few other students who
Yeah.
started doing few things, and they continue to do that way after their college admissions were sent. Many, even 1 decade later,
Yeah.
I've seen the student continue what they do. So that's real, motivation. That's where it comes from. Fantastic. You mentioned about Columbia and at Stanford, the MBA, and then some of the maybe inspirations came from there as well. What do you think is a university setting really like to find meaning beyond just attending classes? And this is more for students to know that it's not about just getting into a university. It's the experiences, the conversations you have, the clubs that you join, and the real work and skills that you pick up with less stress of failure. It's more like a lab where you can goof up a little bit and then sort of be more prepared for the real world. What do you think university meant for you and the MBA meant for you?
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, Colombia was definitely life-changing. You talked about stress. It was stressful. And I think part of it was because I hadn't reframed, I hadn't realized that, okay, I don't have to ace every class. And even if I want to do very well in every class, the goalposts are very different in a US university compared to a CBSE school. And Columbia in general at that time was known for being very rigorous and quite stressful. I'm not sure how much the culture has changed. There were conversations about it when I was leaving. But I think one thing that all incoming college students need to do from India, especially if you are not in an IB or an IGCSE A levels curriculum, is to reframe that the point of college is not to mug things up and just do very well on the exam. The point of even attending classes in college is to open your mind. And if you have an open mind, and if you actually also then use that open mind to apply to whatever readings and assignments, you probably will do well. And again, it's not about, oh my gosh, I got an A minus and not an A, or I got a 92 and not a 96. The point is to learn something, and you probably will be okay. Your GPA will be fine. And I think that reframe took me a while, and probably took me the better part of a year. And I think college would have been way less stressful if I had realized that sooner. But having said that, I think for me, college, the fact that the classes were so different from what I was used to in school was a big part of why it was life changing, because you were actually having debates and discussions in college about questions that were about meaning. And again, this perhaps was specific to Columbia, where there's a core curriculum that every single person has to take. And so you're studying all these philosophers of the Western canon: Plato, Aristotle, Hegel, Kant, various. Okay, through the centuries you're studying all these philosophers, and you're debating with people, okay, what does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean to live a life with meaning? What are the rules that should govern a society? And you can't be like, oh well, this rule works for me, so it's fine. You're thinking for every single person in the world. And if you were not you, but you were born as a poor person, would you also be okay with these rules that we're just debating? And it sounds very esoteric, but it's really not, because it helps you think of your place in the world. And I think that is the biggest life changing gift that college gave me. It really made me think about my place in the world, my privilege, the opportunities I've got, and what I want to do with this life that I've been given. And sort of, if I just accept that, okay, the universe has been kind to me, I've been dealt a very good hand, so now what do I do? And I think I definitely give that credit to the classes in college and my classmates with whom I spoke to during and after class. So that, of course, was a big part of it. And again, it's not about, oh, I got an A in this class, but it's, oh, I read this interesting text and then I debated it. And my professor said these interesting things and my students said these other things. And that opened, my mind. And so that's the academic part. And of course, the non-academic part is really, I would say, just amazing, especially if you're at any college, but Columbia is a large university, so the infrastructure is great. You have so many clubs to pursue any hobby you want. Columbia had a dance department. I really, looking back, I wish I'd taken more dance classes, but I took a modern dance class, I took an African dance class, amazing gym facilities. So I took judo, I took tennis. And I think one of the things that I was super excited for when I was going back to school at Stanford, I was like, I'm going to have infrastructure again. I can just pay, I'm paying a tuition, so I can learn things and I can learn anything. And that flexibility of, okay, I can join this class or this club and have a community to pursue a new interest, I think is so special about US universities. And I think, again, I would encourage everybody to use this time to explore. Don't spread yourself too thin. You don't have to explore every single club that's out there. But if you have 5, 7 interests, or you have 3, 4 interests, you explore those and then maybe go out of your comfort zone, do something that you didn't think you would be interested in and see if you like it. That I think I really loved. And I think it's sort of also stayed on with me. I joke that I'm a serial hobbyist now. So I'm learning Urdu. I just started learning Kathak 5, 6 months ago at the age of 32. My body's probably not ready to learn such a new skill. But I think part of it was that I just loved being in that environment where you could just pick up a skill. And I think that curiosity and that desire to learn has stayed with me.
Wonderful. Like, this is so good for everyone listening. The other thing which I wanted to touch upon was academic culture, which
Yeah.
you briefly mentioned, like core curriculum, uh,
Yeah.
built to make you introspect, debate, discuss, and it also sort of defend your arguments. How about at Stanford? When you look at different universities as a whole, or GSB at Stanford, the business school, how is, of course, it's a business program, so it's a different level of stress, a different level of engagement. How would you say academic culture influences the experience a student has?
It's a hard question for me to answer because I was so much older. I was 25 when I went into Stanford. And so it was not a life changing experience. And I don't say this with malice. I think it was not meant to be a life changing experience. I really liked it. I met very interesting people. I learned some skills. But business school is not meant for you to introspect and think about your place in the world. And so that did not happen with me. However, I I think some of my friends and batchmates who were studying abroad for the first time had a significantly more transformation experience than me, because it was the first time that they were attending classes where you had to participate, and raising your hand was a good thing. And again, there was some discussion based classes, there was a fair bit of reading, again, in few classes only. So for other folks that were not used to the US education system, it still was, I would say, very different, and therefore perhaps changed how they were used to studying or engaging with the world. I think for me, because I had already done a bachelor's in the US and was familiar with the system, I think academically, I did not find Stanford to be that transformational. But I think when we talk about culture, I do think, of course, academics does inform culture. And I can imagine if I had been at Stanford undergrad, I might have taken more computer science classes or whatever was popular at the time. So 100% it does impact culture, because certain things are more socially acceptable. And I think within my business school, an example was that Stanford is really, really good. Stanford Business School is really good at soft skills classes. And in other business schools, perhaps the focus is not so much on that. But at Stanford, like, there are some courses that are about leadership and coaching and managing teams that 90% of the cohort takes. And I'm so glad I took them. And I would say those classes were quite transformational for me. And maybe I would not have taken them if I were at another business school. So I think you could be, like, if I were to, again, think of, like, try to convert this into advice or an insight that would be helpful for a
Future
student
applic. Yeah.
considering colleges.
Hmm.
The academic culture does impact what how, I mean, the academic culture does impact your experience, but you can always carve out a way for yourself. If you had asked me before going to Columbia, oh, do you want to study philosophy? I'd have been like, no. But even like in my second semester itself, I already realized that okay, I'm so glad I'm here, because if I was not forced to take these classes, I would not have taken them, and these classes have been amazing. So I would say, every college gives you some flexibility, and so do have an open mind. Like if wherever you go, you're going to be able to carve out your major and your interests in any case, and maybe the thing that you're not so sure about, you'd like. So that's sort of what I'd say. And again, maybe if I'd gone to Stanford undergrad, I might not have studied philosophy, and my life path would have been different. But I'm sure I would have learned some other really cool stuff that would have impacted my life. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks. That's awesome. I will switch gears to career clusters. How people
Yeah.
are now increasingly figuring out or reconfiguring how to look at careers in this age of AI. What do you think is the exposure students should have now, given that there are interdisciplinary fields emerging a lot quicker than it used to earlier? So, if we were to look at career choices your batchmates at Columbia might have made, or you followed that trajectory, or even batchmates at GSB, what have been really interesting takeaways for you as to how people make decisions about careers, and including yourself? Yeah, we could start with yourself and then move on.
Sure. So, of course, we graduated very pre AI, and even from 2018 to 2020, when I was at Stanford, people were talking about blockchain. People were not even talking about AI. So, very different world. I think in terms of my career trajectory, uh, I I of course, as I mentioned, had that social sector uh, mindset, and so I considered those options. But I think I was not so much thinking existentially, because AI was not there. So I was like, okay, I'll do this job, and then now I have a good degree, so I'll just do another job late. Like, if worst case, I'll just pivot. And I think one thing that life taught me, at least in the US, is it's very hard to pivot. Maybe in India, you can pivot a little bit because people really value degrees and educational experience. And if you have uh, a solid degree, a top 10 college degree, either from India or abroad on your CV, people will talk to you. I think in the US, they don't do that. In the US, your professional experience is really, really valued a lot more. So it doesn't matter that I'm from Columbia or Stanford and I'm applying to an investing job. If I have only 6 months of investing experience, somebody who's in a college that's ranked, who graduate from a college that's ranked 50 or 60 in the world, but has more experience than me, will be prioritized over me. And that's just the reality of the US market. And I think so. Now in hindsight, I would think about, okay, developing some skills. However, the caveat with AI is, what are the skills that are really relevant? And I think uh, one, of course, I think everybody should be comfortable with computational thinking and learning to use AI tools. And that is, again, not that it's really not rocket science. And you don't need to like learn a coding language. You just need to sort of learn how to prompt the AI and be comfortable with looking into the code that it gives you. And again, that's more computational thinking than really like complicated like being a developer. So I would say that's just a skill. Like, it's like basic computer literacy. When my parents were growing up, it was typing. When I was growing up, it was like, okay, you need to know Excel and Word. I think now it's gone up to, you need to be able to work with these AI tools. So that, I think, is just basic. And I think the second thing is just, I think now more than ever, people will want smart generalists. I always looked at my generalist background as a little bit of a handicap, that okay, what am I going to do? I should have studied computer science, like my dad told me to study computer science. But now I think being a generalist and just being able to learn things quickly is going to be a superpower if you are trying to work at a desk job. And I think the third thing is, of course, anything that requires communication, soft skills, talking to people. That skill every single person should hone, because those jobs I feel are a little more immune to AI.
Fantastic. Yeah, you'd better want to, I'd want to call you over for our six human skills AI cannot replace workshop we do with students. It's really about problem solving, but sitting with discomfort. Very often we want to walk in and say, oh, we can solve this, right? But do we really care for it or empathize
Yeah,
uh, the idea, the pain behind the problem?
yeah,
And I think what you did by going to the landfill at Ghazipur and different experiences was that part. So one is to understand problems, but also ask the right questions. And so asking questions is a skill. Definitely, it was always a skill, but even now it's even become more important. The prompt engineering need in today's age to be professionally more qualified is urgent. So we've got these six skills, questions. Then once the questions start giving you different alternatives, deciding which path to follow to solve that problem. So that being decisive is a very important part of our journey. We just can't sit and be confused about it. It goes on and on as to how we build our curiosity, how we build the prototype and the solution, how do we get more people to buy in, how do we listen and improve and lead eventually. So these are some of the workshop outcomes that we hope our students have. And hearing from you and others would be a fantastic way to document
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Okay, so last question, and circling back to the idea of social impact. Very often, students, even after getting degrees and maybe even interning in the social impact sector, they have they have a sense of what it is like. But what do you think is misunderstood the most about being in the impact space as careers, and what questions should people really ask before pursuing it?
I, I think people forget that the folks that work in the social impact space are also human. And from the outside, and you're like, oh wow, these people are so noble and they're helping other people. And sure, there is, I don't know about nobility, but there is of course that desire to help people, which should be commended. But the social impact space also has politics, and the social impact space also has turf wars and all the negative aspects of any organizational culture or any sort of workplace are also there in social impact. So I would say don't go in with your eyes shut that, oh, this is an NGO, so everything must be great. Evaluate it the way you would evaluate any organization, in the sense that, okay, do I like the team? Is the culture positive, right? You don't expect, of course, the same perks that you get in like a big tech company. That is not going to exist, and you have to be okay with a little bit of discomfort. But a positive work environment is a non-negotiable. And just how there are many startups that have really bad work cultures, there are many non-profits that also have negative work cultures. And so I would just say, don't go in with your eyes closed, because then people are in for rude shocks and they're like, oh, I thought it would be in this way, and then there would be another, and then you feel upset, and then the pendulum kind of swings the other way, where you're like, I don't want to have anything to do with this sector, which is also unfortunate, because then you miss out on doing some really good work with good organizations. So I think it's just evaluate a job based on the dimensions that you would want to work there. And I think that's the work, the manager, the culture, the pay of course is there, but that I think you have to be okay with the slightly lower pay. But I don't forget all the other aspects that would make a job enjoyable. And I think my first job at Central Square Foundation was extremely positive, in terms of the work culture, in terms of the skills I learned. And I think that if I had had a negative experience, maybe I would have left the sector, and maybe I would have said I want to, sorry, do something else. So I think that is really important.
Thanks, Tanvi. It's been so fun to catch up and do a meaningful conversation like this. So look forward to meeting you again very soon.
Likewise, it was really good to chat.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.